Ukraine's capital came under another deadly Russian attack. Massive explosions lit up the sky overnight as ballistic missiles and drones hammered parts of Kyiv, killing at least 12 people in the city itself.
Let's get more now from CNN's Claire Sebastian joining me. So what are we hearing, Claire, about this latest barrage of strikes that were launched by Russia?
Yeah, Paolo, Zelensky had warned that another big attack was incoming on Sunday night. And here we have it, the second attack on a very large scale, targeting mainly the capital, Kyiv, in about 4 days. Last week on Thursday, we saw the deadliest attack on the capital so far this year. At least 30 people were killed in a massive drone and missile barrage. This one seems to have been slightly smaller in scale. Obviously, they're all terrifying for the Ukrainian people having to live through this. But we're hearing of 68 missiles, 351 drones. The key thing to know there, though, is that while the Ukrainians were able to shoot down 37 missiles, they did not manage to avert any of the ballistic missiles that were fired. And Zelensky saying openly that was because of an insufficient supply of interceptor missiles. So that is going to be a key question going into the NATO summit this week, is will allies be able to step up and provide more of those supplies to Ukraine? And another thing to note, though, is that this isn't just now on the Russian side that we're seeing these overnight attacks. We're seeing an escalating tit for tat on both sides. The Russian Ministry of Defense saying that they shot down or averted some 519 Ukrainian drones over multiple different regions. One of the key targets appears to have been the Leningrad region, home to Russia's second city of St. Petersburg, where the governor is reporting damage to infrastructure around several key oil ports. More rolling power outages also seen in Crimea, in Russian-occupied Crimea. So again, tit-for-tat escalation on both sides. We're seeing a more aggressive posture, I think, from Russia in many ways. And over the weekend, Putin and Trump spoke on the phone on July 4th, and a clear attempt, I think, from Putin to wrestle the narrative back. You've seen more sympathy from Trump towards the Ukrainian side recently, so we're seeing more of those attempts from Russia and Putin trying to claim again that this is these are terrorist attacks from Ukraine, and that Russia is confidently, in the words of the foreign ministry in Russia, advancing on the front line. So the questions going into the NATO summit is, I think, number one, air defenses for Ukraine, and secondly, will this be the moment, given the successes that we're seeing from Ukraine, will it be the moment that the US decides to further tighten the screws on Russia?
President Trump is set to head to Ankara Monday night. He spoke to both the Russian and Ukrainian presidents over the weekend. How might this reverberate through the summit?
I think because President Zelensky will be here in person, and he's a powerful and emotionally connective figure, with these NATO leaders, he will be pressing the point that NATO needs urgent air defenses. I mean, just look at what happened overnight last night. 66 ballistic missiles, 29 of them got through. Ukraine used to be able to do better than that. Partly Russia has got more sophisticated, faster jet-propelled ballistic missiles that can penetrate where they couldn't penetrate before. 350 drones, 18 of them landed, as you say, 12 people killed in Kyiv, 5 in the Kyiv region as well. So it is a pressing need. President Zelensky really wants to be able to produce and get license for making Patriot missiles, defensive missiles, inside of Ukraine. It's not clear that it's going to get that, but there is a Defense Investment Fund forum meeting here tomorrow where there's expected to be a financial significant billions and billions, tens of $billions financial commitment to Ukraine to support them this year, next year, in the war against Russia. So that's what President Zelensky will be looking for. President Trump is going to be coming in here looking for something else. He's going to be looking to make sure that his NATO European partners that has been leaning on for a long time to up their defense spending, 5% of GDP is what is required by agreement last year of the Hague Declaration from the Hague Leaders Summit, of 5% GDP by 2035. So President Trump's going to be looking to see who's doing that, who isn't doing it, and I think it's going to be very interesting to see how he deals with countries like Spain that aren't stepping up and haven't so far made a commitment to getting to that level of spending over the next 9 years. And I think there's anxiety here. When President Trump walks into a NATO summit these days, there's worry. It was only a few months ago that he wanted to annex Greenland, which is part of Denmark, which is a NATO allies country. And then on top of that, President Trump's been frustrated with the way his NATO allies have not, in his opinion, stepped up sufficiently during Epic Fury, the US-Iran war. He wanted more support. So all of that is in the mix here. President Zelensky will be very focused on what he needs. President Trump, undoubtedly, very clear and determined to get what he wants out of it as well.
I think this summit takes on a huge significance specifically for Zelensky. I mean, obviously, we hear time and time again how much Russia continues to really try to put pressure on the Ukrainians. For President Trump, some of the words that he's used in the sort of recent past has been, you know, we should somehow find an end to this war, we should get Russia to knock it off. Obviously, Zelensky at this point is really looking for America's resolve, not just words here. We know that Trump spoke on the phone to Vladimir Putin and Zelensky, as I mentioned over the weekend, in honor of July 4th. What does Trump need to do at this point to really change things, just in terms of ensuring that there is some kind of momentum when it comes to a peace deal here?
Look, I think that, first of all, Russia's attacks, in addition to being deadly and devastating for the people and for Ukraine, are also intended clearly to be very provocative. The timing there, and with President Trump, it's very difficult to know. As we know now, we've been watching him since 2015, 2016. It's very difficult to know how he responds to that provocation. He travels to the NATO summit. He's clearly has a personal fondness for Erdogan, and so that's good for NATO. And he's also in the past had a personal fondness for Putin, but having that provocation on the eve of the NATO summit could lead President Trump to do what he should do, which is to double down on NATO's demonstration of unity. I mean, after all, this is a summit. You know, you could say it's only a summit. So it really is about signaling. It's about NATO signaling unity, coherence, and not division. And that provocation by Vladimir Putin should be an invitation to President Trump to demonstrate the strength, the resilience, and the commitment of the NATO alliance. Whether he will take that invitation is very difficult to anticipate. You know, you can imagine a scenario where he pushes hard on Zelensky and says, you know, you two have to help to end the war. But let's hope that that's not what he does. China is watching, Iran is watching, and this comes at a very difficult time for the United States and Europe, where President Trump feels personally affronted that the Europeans did not step up, you know, immediately to support the U.S. in its war with Iran.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned a few key points, not just the fact that President Trump is sort of angry at European allies for not stepping up when it comes to the war with Iran, but this idea that one of the main reasons why President Trump has said that he's attending this meeting in the first place is because of his close ties. I mean, obviously he does seem to love strong men, his close ties with President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. And it comes at a time not just in terms of this important bilateral relationship between Erdogan and President Trump, but also at a time when the president has repeatedly talked about pulling and drawing down U.S. forces in Europe and sort of scaling back America's role in NATO. Just talk to us about how all of that changes the dynamics and the calculations within NATO itself.
Well, we've seen across Europe, across NATO's European members, a real push to increase their spending, to try to increase, you know, the number one, I think, barrier to Europe being stronger within NATO is that interoperability, that cohesiveness, joint defense procurement, all sorts of internal mechanisms in addition to just the raw spending calculation that will allow Europe, a Europeanized NATO, to really cohere. Now, there are a lot of barriers to that. The UK is certainly one. The fact that it struggled to ramp up that defense spending. I think this could be a very difficult NATO summit for outgoing Prime Minister Keir Starmer. But, you know, this is important, signaling this to the president while, and here I think is the catch, never signaling too much autonomy or, you know, being perceived to be resistant to the US. I think for Europe, there's a real sequencing challenging here. Europe cannot afford for the US to withdraw preemptively or too quickly or frankly at all. It needs those strategic enablers, but in the short term, it just needs the United States to remain committed. And some people, people are divided on how they see this moment. Some people see this as a forever change. Others see this as a Trump moment, and many people are somewhere in a third slot. I don't want to say in the middle, but in one way or the other, the short-term issue is to really keep the U.S. on board while allowing Europe to move forward and try to cohere more internally. These are incredibly difficult challenges. Many European states have done very, very well, but time is not really on the side of any kind of transatlantic division. It would be, in my view, a grave disaster and should be guarded against.
Joining me right now is Democratic Congressman Brad Schneider of Illinois. He sits in the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Thank you for being here, Congressman. This latest round of Russian attacks, we're just looking at the numbers: 68 missiles, 350 drones. Ukraine saying that they did not fend off any of the ballistic missiles launched because of an insufficient supply of interceptor missiles, which really puts the focus on where does this war head now? What does this moment mean for NATO?
Well, the conference in Ankara that starts today and will go over the next couple of days is covering three things: defense, cooperation, and investment by NATO members, the ability to produce the necessary weapons by NATO members, and Ukraine. So 2 out of the 3 key issues of this conference is about what we're seeing in Ukraine right now. The fact that supplies have been diminished, if not in some cases depleted, and Russia continues its illegal attack against a sovereign nation. And we need to stand with Ukraine and make sure that they're able to protect their independence and sovereignty.
But it begs the question is, since you have Vladimir Putin and President Trump speaking ahead of this summit, where does President Trump's focus lie right now in terms of offering more assistance to Ukraine?
100%. That question's been asked time and time again, because every time there seems to be a critical issue, President Trump turns to Putin rather than focusing on the needs of Zelensky. And it's incredibly unfortunate. Russia attacked Ukraine. Ukraine is an ally. Ukraine is fighting for its independence. And there's no question that Russia would continue past Ukraine if they were successful. So that's why Europe is standing so strong with Ukraine, and the United States needs to stand strongly with Ukraine. And the question about where President Trump stands is something that's always hovering over every single discussion.